Hello everyone, it's Gigabeef here, and today we're going to be talking about some basic money-making runs and tips on how to maximise your gains on the flea market. We'll be looking at 2 runs for interchange and 1 reversible run for customs that I like to do, so stick around and let's get going. Okay, so we all know that making money is hard for new players and beginners. This is because the maps, and looting especially, is quite detailed in Tarkov and requires some experience to know where to go, how to navigate those routes safely, and what to take once you're there. That being said, the best tool for making money is using the flea market efficiently once you get to level 10. If you aren't there yet, hang on, do your quests and reach that milestone, because until then you'll be selling items at bad prices to the traders and not reaching anywhere near your full potential. I did a video very recently of my progression there this wipe, so check it out if you need to. Now, like many players who are not full-time streamers, and especially now that I have a little new family member to look after, I find myself much more limited on my ability to put a ton of hours into this game. What this means is that we, as a collective of players with less time, need to find more ways to be efficient when we're playing so that we can make the best use of the hours that we get in raid. In short, this means that we want to spend as much time playing PMC as possible so that we can complete quests and level up. So why is it that I use scav for money running then? Well, overall I believe that if you pick short and fast runs to complete with your scav, this can nicely complement your PMC play by trying to make as much money as possible with lower risk. There are quite a few benefits for playing scav for these runs rather than PMC. Firstly, the speed of getting into a game when no time is spent making a loadout. This is actually a massive point, as most Tarkov players spend an extreme amount of time in the menu unless they really have their stuff together, which tends to be endgame players with tons of experience and massive stashes full of thick cases. Secondly, you get given free stuff, so you're ahead already just by loading in. Taking PMC means that we have to use some of our hard-earned net worth to simply load into the map, and no, I don't recommend hatchet running. With scav, we already get something to use, which in the worst case means we could leave and make 50k or so even with the crappiest kit and no loot. When we're doing money runs, I have no real interest in fighting other players. The beauty of scav is that we join a game partway through, which firstly means that we don't have to participate in the PMC spawn wars of the first few minutes, but also means that some of the server population will already either be dead or have left the map, making it less likely that we'll bump into someone that outguns us entirely. We also don't get shot at by other AI scavs, which makes moving around the map much easier. You can even use these scavs as cover while you loot certain areas to make sure there are no PMCs coming that way. Finally, back to our point on limited time, we could do a scav run even if we only have 10 minutes to spare, as unless we're playing factory, PMC raids tend to be much more drawn out and tactical, although that's obviously playstyle dependent. When you're time limited, you don't want to be forced to play aggressive to try to leave the map unnecessarily if required, and so a swift scav run will do the job nicely. Okay, so we've decided we want to do some money runs using our scav, but where do we want to go? I personally like to run a couple of routes either on interchange or customs for a good balance between speed, loot availability and the risk of running into other players. I have chosen routes that are really quick intentionally so we can get back to questing and levelling our PMC. We also want to make sure that we have an idea in mind for either side of the map so we can customise it depending on where we spawn. Let's take a look at interchange first. This map is perfect for scav gameplay, as unlike with PMCs, you can leave from either the Emacom exit or the railway exit in every game, which makes it so much easier to get out as you have the flexibility to choose your extraction point. My first route ends at the Emacom extract and focuses mainly on industrial loot. We can spawn somewhere on the east side of the map, by power station, in the underground car park or around the Goshan area. I use this run slightly less, but it can be okay, however there are less spawn points that make sense to choose this route for me, and this side of the map doesn't have as many caches. However, the industrial loot can be pretty good and relatively uncontested. Okay, so the ideal route for this one starts around power station. You can actually look into power station itself if you fancy. I normally find that this area is quite looted already, so there are a few toolboxes in here. It's got one there. We've got one over here. I normally give these a miss, to be honest, also including the buildings outside. So there's a couple of buildings over on this side. If we have a look in here, there's a little cluster. So there's another toolbox in there and another box here and then a small box there to loot. But I normally find that this stuff is already done and I normally give these a miss, to be honest. So we're going to want to head up into the back of Goshan into the industrial area. So typically the way that I do this is I come in through here and I go up this ramp. If you want to check on something along the way, there's a weapons box down here that you can look into. And there's some loose item spawns here, Tushonka, which you need for finding raid for a quest, and like a bag there. So once you've finished looting those, then I head straight up the ramp here into the back of the warehouse, which is where most of the interesting stuff is going to be. Now in this area, on this shelving, there's a lot of the time this is missed by a ton of people, so you've got little items like this. You've got these shears, which are useful for building into other stuff in the hideout, and people usually use them for crafting. There's a small bag in here that you can look into. Then right at the background here, there's another toolbox we can grab. And then broadly speaking, you just want to keep looking along these shelves for the loose loot. I think it's one thing that people don't look for enough is the loose loot around in this area. Because sometimes it can be quite hard to spot because it's not in specific containers. As you move down, there's another container here. And another bag there that you can loot. As you move in, there's another weapons box right there. And remember, this is all in the interest of speed. So we just want to do one whiz through and that's that. We've got a grenade case here. You can ignore all of this. Toolbox there, which is normally done, and then more shelves here. So we want to run all the way through. Now, if you don't really get that much stuff, if the loot's not very good here, then what you can do is you can switch over to the second route if you so wish. Otherwise, you can just try to extract. So what I tend to do, once I've gone through here, and there's a couple of boxes through in this section as well. There's a container here. There's a weapons crate up on top of that in this box. And then all the way around the back of this, you've got a crate in there. So now we come to leave. Obviously we have to be a little careful when we're leaving through here. I now just skip everything else. So when we're looking to go, we're trying to get to Emacom, which is over on that side. So the easiest way normally is I normally run through here, jump down just there, over this fence, make a beeline through this hole here that you can see in the fence line. And then we move to the extract. Now I like sticking to this side because the other side is extremely open. I never go out of Emacom this way. It's just so open, everybody can see you. There's also actually one cache here, but I never hit this because it's so in the open. This thing is just so obvious to everybody. It's completely insane, so I never bother using this, even though the caches are pretty good. As you can see, some of the loot is actually decent. And then we move all the way around and just watching out for exit campers on our way out to make sure that we don't get sniped for all of our precious loot that we've managed to gather in the game. One little trick that I really like about this extract, which somebody showed me once upon a time, so rather than just standing here in the middle of nowhere, you can jump up onto this truck and hide behind it, which kind of saves you potentially if somebody's hiding in this bush or something. It gives them less sight lines to kill you. Next up is the railway cache run. I really like this one. You can kind of spawn anywhere except for the east edge of the map because otherwise it takes too long. This is the one I normally do when I have downtime, as it's pretty brain dead and you hardly ever meet anybody. Usually the worst case is the spots are looted already, which probably happens about half the time when I do it, but no run is 100% when playing scav, as PMCs can always get to those locations first. Okay, so for this run what you want to do is you really just want to get anywhere outside onto the east side of the map, so that you're outside and you're over in the big car park area, because that's really where we're going to start with this one. I tend to move up along the entire front of the store. Normally I'll go through the tree line, but there seems to be hardly anybody here. Most people are inside the centre, so they're not really looking out to try and kill you, and you're quite unlucky if you find somebody who's also coming out at the same time. It is quite rare to get shot from someone like that. So coming all the way up, the first one that I like is in the race car track thing here, this go-karting arena. So we get into the side through the metal fencing, we jump over into the middle, and make our way over to the first cache, which is hidden away in these bushes. It's quite hard to spot, but it is on the south side and is just there. Next we're going to jump over to this one here, which is again quite hard to see, but it's very, very close to the first one. So just inside here, you can see there is a cache right there. And they've changed it, so if you move away from these caches now, they don't open out, so just remember that. Also, one random tip, remember to use the control button to move stuff in, because it's a lot quicker than dragging it yourself. Next, we're going to go under the bridge. Now, this one gets looted all the time. People will know about this one and use this one. It's quite close to one of the PMCs spawns, so a lot of people go and grab it before they run into the shopping centre itself. But it can be worth checking out, given that it's on our route. Here, you have to crouch in to go and get it, because the ceiling height is very low. Ooh, Le Poor Magnum. Then we're going to kind of start making our way towards the exit. The next one that we're going to do is on the route towards the railroad. So we're going to come here down in the nice low ground, trying to avoid anybody. I hardly ever see anybody in this area, partly because there's nothing here. So there's not really any reason for anyone to be here, to be honest. So as we come up here, there's the little hill, which is just on the other side of this. There's a cache just up here. Like there. And then we make our way along the tree line to the next one. So as we move along here, this one's very easy to miss. It's in one of the trees next to this tiny little puddle here. It's right there. I nearly missed it myself. Right, then the next one is in the concrete over here. So it's not this first block, but it's next to the second block. Through the bush, around the other side, and it's between the crack between these two things here. It's quite exposed, but I've never been shot at here, to be honest. I've had one gunfight here, I think, the whole wipe so far. Next, we're going to move up to this bush here. which is where you're going to find another one of these secret caches that's quite hard to spot. In there. And then finally, there's another one up here by this set of concrete up here, just before we leave. So we look down there, and this one's pretty obvious, it's right here. So you can get some decent stuff out of these things. Basically now we just want to leave and go to the extract, which is right up here, and this is nice and quick. This route hardly takes any time at all. That's why I really like it. I don't cover every single thing. This isn't supposed to be an in-depth loot run where we hit every last item, container, or anything. This is going to be hitting the easy ones, the ones where you're going to have the maximum chance of getting something decent. You can add some other caches further down if you want to, but given the distance you have to run, I don't normally bother, and these will usually do. You can get a whole range of stuff in the caches, so do your best to figure out what is good and what isn't. Typically speaking, one slot items are the best, and actual weapons are not worth it on slots. Ammo is amazing if you can get top tier stuff like Igolnik or M61 or even M855A1, and the rest is normally not worth it over the standard industrial loot. You should be aiming for 10,000 rubles per inventory slot or more, and you'll work out over time what is worth it as you play more. Moving on to customs, these runs can be okay, but I find that it takes a little bit longer than Interchange because of the map design, as you have to be more careful of other players when roaming around. Also, there are a lot of scav exits, so even I have to look them up at the start of the wipe, to be honest, because I never scav on customs later on, which means that I forget which ones are which. Because customs is much more linear, you're also forced to start at one end and travel to the other, which is the same as the PMC players, so we don't have the flexibility of Interchange where we can leave from both sides. The main route that I use here relies on caches again, but with a bit more of a sprinkling of other useful buildings and locations. However, it is reversible this time, given that we have to go either east to west or west to east. You typically get a scav exit along the north side of the map somewhere, so I generally focus on this central section for looting before making a swift escape. Alright, so where this one typically tends to start for me is once you're by the road into dorms over by construction. So I usually run across this road, move around the outside here, around this pipe, and straight into this container for our first spot. So this one I actually don't find looted all that often, to be honest. Next up, we're going to move around to bus station, because there's one here is a little bit in the open, given that it's kind of a high traffic area. But if we move through onto the road, you can obviously approach this slightly more stealthily if you're doing it in a real game. But in the tyre pile here, there is a searchable cache right there. Once we've done this, I quite like popping up into this building if you're feeling ballsy and there's not a huge amount of fighting going on. So jump over the barbed wire, through the container, then we're going to get ourselves up these stairs. And there's quite a few nice cases up here, which is the reason why I quite like it. So you've got one normal bag there, you've got this loot container here, it's kind of supply crate container. And then you've got some loose loot here, so you can get things like meds, Solewers just up there. And then finally over on this side, you've got this container here. So make sure you don't fall down the holes. Right, so we move away from here, come down, pop ourselves onto that box there, and then we're going to carry on moving around for some more caches. So the next one is what I call the forest cache. Let's leap out of here, around the cars, over this. Now if you go from the corner of bus station, and you go pretty much 45 degrees away from it, you'll see by this log section, there's a cache right there. Some of them can be a little glitchy to get into, so you have to persist a touch. Now, we're going to move towards gas station. If this one's safe, maybe you should go and do it. Otherwise, you don't need to do this one if you don't think it's safe over here, because there's a lot of people fighting at gas station often. And it's just around the wall on this side here if you don't think you're going to get beamed in the head. Next one, we can move up to the far electricity pylon. So this is up between these two rocks here. This one's notoriously annoying to try and actually get access to, but you have to sit quite far away, further away than you would think. If you're close, it won't let you do it. Right, next one. So if we move our way up to the main mast on top of the hill, there's a cache around the outside edge of the wall that we can hit. Which is just in here. So next up, as we move away from this, if we thread our way through the trees here, there's a kind of bare tree over on this side where you can see a cache next to it there, or a stash I should say in this case. And then next up we're going to go to the military base checkpoint 1, which is also a scav exit. So if I had that extract and I had something decent, I'd probably just leave out of here. This one is quite straightforward, around the outside, and bam. So if you're still out of luck, you can continue to move down to the scav checkpoints. So there's 2 more caches down here that you can go and look for. There's also some other loot inside these buildings. So what you want to do is look for this one here on this table. There's food loot and there's a bag there. There's weapons loot on this table here. So you can see there's a stopper, there's a handguard, a few other bits and pieces. If you look inside this crate, there's a toolbox there, and you can get loot spawn on this one. I don't normally hit this one, but you can if you want to, which is all the way over on this side. As usual, these things are well hidden in bushes. There's one right there. And then if we go back the way that we came and we want to move into the actual compound itself, we have another point through here. So normally by this point you should have loads of loot, to be honest, but if you do need to carry on, or you start down this side and you want to go for some of the spawn points on the eastern side of the map, there's 2 more caches that you can grab. So it's in this bush here. If you just look down there, we've got a nice cache there. Hex grid. You can get amazing things in here. This is the new level 6 armor. It just shows the value of the caches. Then as we move away from here, there's another cache over on this side by the pipes, which is just in here. Now, if that wasn't enough for you, there's a ton of loot in this building in general. There's another crate in there. If you've still not got enough, this is a typical point that you used to be able to go to even back before the customs expansion was added. And there's a weapons box up there, and there's another weapons box at the back here that you get through from this ladder here. So that should be plenty of loot to be getting on with and so that you can extract. So all in all, I prefer the Interchange Railway run as it's fast, clean and easy most of the time. Now once you're out with the haul, this is only the first half. We have to sell all of our stuff that we have gathered as best as possible. This is the issue with not being level 10, as it's going to be okay, but not that profitable compared to selling valuable and scarce resources to other players. Industrial loot is very valuable at the start of the wipe due to everyone working on hideout progression, so that is things like toolboxes, filing cabinets and shelves. Make sure you check everything that you grab and try to make a note of the things that are required for tasks or for the hideout, even those that you don't need personally anymore. Items like the short barrel for the M4, which lots of people use for Gunsmith 4, or even 30-round magazines for AKs, mags for the 5.7, hunters, and really any attachments that aren't the stock versions all go for a lot on the flea market. When you're scavenging rounds, don't forget to sell them on the flea even if you use that version and can buy it from the traders yourself. If you pick up M80 or AP 6.3 for example, but you can buy it for yourself from Peacekeeper, sell the Find and Raid ammo on the fleet and rebuy it from the traders, as this is generally quite profitable. Level 4 armour is also very expensive early wipe as it protects against most players at this stage. Well, until BSG released a tidal wave of 7.62 BP upon the player base, that is. If you get the opportunity, pick one up on your body so that it doesn't take any space in your limited inventory and sell it when you get back if you aren't going to use it yourself. The one part of making money that I haven't mentioned is the hideout. This is a fantastic tool for making cash in EFT even when you can't play. The intermediate goal for all players intending to make a serious go at Tarkov should be to eventually get to the Intelligence Center level 2, as this unlocks the Bitcoin farm and makes the game so much easier. However, even from the beginning, at Workbench level 1 you can do things like making wires from power cords, which is pretty much always profitable, so keep your eyes peeled for some good crafts and you'll be on your way to a solid start in no time. So as usual, please do consider dropping a like and a sub if you found my content useful, and you can also follow me on Twitter and Twitch to catch me when I'm live. Until then, I'll see you next time, and as always, have fun in your raids.